creating healthy urgency. Most of you are familiar with that there's kind of two ways to arrive at making a decision. There's a rational way at arriving at it, and then there's an emotional way. And most people tend to be emotional decision makers, and then they use the rational or the mathematical to sort of prop that up. If you've ever found yourself saying, man, they just don't get it, or man, I wish they would listen to me, chances are what you're doing is you're jumping from where they are right now to where you want them to be in the future without moving them through this process that I'm going to teach you right now. So let's talk about the four phases of emotional decision making. Number one is positive present. So I'm going to use this through the lens of a buyer, but I'll explain in just a second why I think you could also use this for a seller, and it is a very good time to be a seller as well. So you have a buyer who is giving you the everything's fine. We're just going to wait. And usually they're going to wait on prices to come down, or they're going to wait on rates to come down, or they're going to wait on the perfect house to come along. They're waiting on something, and they're telling you that everything is fine. And when you hear the word fine, very specifically, when you hear that word, I want you to dig a little bit deeper, because almost always the word fine is a smokescreen. And you know this if your spouse or partner or somebody that's a close friend of yours, and you say, are you okay? And they're like, everything's fine. Chances are it's really not. Okay. They think everything's okay right now. We're moving them to number two, which is negative present. So negative present is to sort of help interrogate the reality of their current situation. So maybe they're saying to you, well, it's fine that we're living in this house that's too small for us right now, or it's fine that we're living with my parents and have been doing that for a while. It's fine. It'll be okay. Maybe everything's not as good. So I'm going to give you some questions here in just a second that you can use to uncover this. However, one of the things you could do here is, like, let's say they're living in a house that they've outgrown. Very, very common challenge for people right now. You might just do something very simple, like ask them what are the things that they really like about their current house, and then what are the things that they would change or that perhaps they don't like about their current house. It's very important that I'm asking the positive, like, what do you like? And then asking the what do you not like? Because I really want to then later key in on the what do you not like. I'm getting them to self-discover the negative present. I'm getting them to self-discover the downside of their current situation. So ultimately, they begin to think maybe everything isn't as good as I thought it was. All right, so there's your negative present. Now we're going to extrapolate that out, negative future. The negative future sounds like, well, let's say that you decided to wait and prices continued to go up. Let's say that you decided to wait and rates didn't go down any farther. Let's say that you decided to wait and you're still in that house a year from now. You're using time and circumstance to extend the negative emotion. Now, to be clear, I'm not doing this to manipulate them. I'm doing this to make sure they understand that this moment in time is going to compound. And as it continues to compound, they're likely to have a different emotional reaction to it. So you could use a question like, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, let's imagine that it's a year from now and you're still in this house. How would that make you feel? So there's two things I'm a little in the weeds here, but hang with me. There's two things I'll draw your attention to, is the phrase, let's imagine. Let's imagine is a phrase that you can use to cause people to think about possibilities. You can use it for positive or negative. So if you were to say, let's imagine that you're still in this house a year from now, and now you can use some of their negative present things, and you don't have enough room for the family, and you don't have a backyard for the dog, and you're still on this busy street that you want to move away from. and it's a year from now, how would that make you feel? So feel is the other thing to underline there. Let's imagine is creative visualization. And then how would that make you feel? Feel is tapping into the emotional response that we're looking for them to have to the compound effect of day after day after day getting to that negative future. I don't want to say something like, what would you think if you were still here a year from now? Think as an intellectual, as a rational word. So I'm looking to key in on things that will trigger creativity and visualization and emotion. So let's imagine and feel are two things that I really want to draw your attention to. So you're moving them to positive future. A couple ways you can get into positive future, and positive future is almost always going to involve your solution to their problem. Now, it might be you just highlighting their solution, but almost always it's going to be your solution to their problem. They're in the idea of negative future. Here it is a year from now, and we still have the small house with no backyard for the dog living on the busy street, and we're not going to feel good about that. So now I need to transition, and I might say something like, are you open to considering? This is another great phrase when we're attempting to persuade. Are you open to considering that now may be a great time to buy? Are you open to considering that prices will likely continue to go up? Are you open to considering that rates may be as low as we're going to see them? Now, I don't actually know factually what's going to happen in the future. I can use all the things that we covered in the first half of today's webinar to educate them and to point them to where we think things are headed. And if you've ever dealt with a stubborn person, this phrase of "are you open to considering" is something that is really, really important. Most people are going to say to you, well, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm open to considering it. Because keep in mind, just a minute ago, everything was fine for them and they wanted to sit in the small house with not enough room for their family, no backyard for the dog, and on the busy street because they wanted to wait on prices to come down or rates to come down or some combination thereof. And we're saying, are you open to considering it? Unless they are super stubborn or super delusional, and you don't want to work with those people anyway, then they're going to say, well, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm open to considering it. In which case, you lay out the stuff that we just went through, and then you're going to layer your own market data on top of that, which I'm going to give you an example of in just a second. So this journey, just to summarize all of this, is I don't want to jump from positive present to positive future. So they say everything's fine. And you're like, well, hey, wait a second. Here's what's going to happen with prices, and here's what's going to happen with rates, and you should buy now because I tell you to. Not that you would ever say that, but you're jumping over them feeling the emotional pain of them staying in a situation that they don't want to be in, compounded over time. And it's ultimately that emotion that's going to move the needle. And then you're going to use the math to back that up. So here's some examples of questions that you would ask yourself or perhaps ask them for creating healthy urgency. The first thing I want to know is, are they clear about what they want? So whether we're talking about buyers or sellers, this is a consultative process where you're slowing down long enough for them to get clear, and you'll see here in question number 2, for you to get clear about what they want. Here's the biggest misstep I see most salespeople make is they don't spend the time up front to understand what's really important to the prospect. They either assume that they know, or they do it in bits and pieces. This is particularly bad on the buy side of things if you're not doing a really thorough buyer consultation and you're out kind of just running around showing houses or piecemealing your questioning around phone calls. We'd really, really love for you to slow down and get clear about what the buyer wants, or if you're representing sellers, about what the seller wants. We got a lot of resources on our website that'll help you do that. And we'll talk more about other programs and offerings that we have before we wrap up today. The second one is, am I clear about what they want? Maybe they're clear and I haven't done a good enough job to get really clear about what it is that they want and how I can deliver on that. Are they capable of doing that? That's more about like, are they financially capable? I mean, to be very practical about this for just a second, is if they legitimately cannot afford to buy a house right now, then that's one thing. Perhaps they need to like move a little bit farther outside of town to give them that opportunity. How motivated are they to do that? And I would ask that as a scale of 1 to 10 question. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're super motivated to buy, and 1 being you'd be fine if you never bought, or 1 to 10, 10 being you're super motivated to sell, 1 being you'd be okay if you never sold. How motivated are you to buy or sell, depending on who you're talking to? And then they're going to give you some number. Usually those numbers are 3s, 5s, or 7s, but that's a different story. And your follow-up question is, what does blank mean to you? So you say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're super motivated to buy, 1 being not at all. How motivated are you? They say 7. Say, great. What does 7 mean to you? And you begin to get their explanation of what that number is. You begin to understand their expectations as part of the consultative process. Do I know what obstacles, either the real ones or the imagined ones, that are in the way of them doing whatever it is that they want to do? What can I do to educate, problem solve, or encourage them through those obstacles? So here's something that you might write down in your notes: is overwhelm will cause people to stall. Overwhelm will cause people to stall. If they are thinking about buying or selling, I think we would all agree that they're going to get overwhelmed with information. They're going to hear it from every friend or family member, probably all well intended, most of them inaccurate. They're going to be aware of what they're hearing in the news. Some of it's accurate, some of it's not. They're going to be inundated with it on social media. They're going to be doing all their own research, which is totally fine. But just the sheer volume of information that's going to be coming at them could potentially overwhelm them. And overwhelm will cause people to retreat into something that's comfortable. Overwhelm will cause people to stall. So if you can create for them this base layer of knowledge and understanding and education on the front end of the relationship, you've now given them something that they can run through a filtering or use as their filtering mechanism. When crazy Uncle Eddie says to them, there's no reason that they should buy right now because he remembers when houses in their area were $90,000 and the zombie apocalypse is coming and houses are going to be cheap again sometime soon. If you have armed them with some knowledge, then they have a little bit that they can sort of, brush off crazy Uncle Eddie. I put a final note in here for you on this topic. There's a big difference between, and those of you who've been around us for a while have heard this, there's a big difference between telling them, showing them, and them telling themselves. And I think a big gap for most salespeople in our industry is they get really hung up in the, I'm just going to tell them what's happening in the market. And even if you're right, there's a degree of skepticism that your prospects are going to bring to that. What I would love for you to do, and I'm sure all of you are doing a good job of this and improving on it, or you wouldn't be here, is show them the information and let them make their own decisions or their own sort of gather their own understanding about what's happening in their markets.